lot of people have always asked me about 35 caliber rifle calibers, and I think we made a video on the 35 Whelen. So I brought out a bunch of 35 caliber rifles, which I think you'll find quite interesting. But before I get into that, a lot of people ask me about storage of guns, and I think I described to you, a number of vaults. My favorite are the small green ones. They're inexpensive. I usually bolt them to the wall or to the floor. They're just sheet metal, but with a security system, it's quite a reasonable security facility for my collection. But about rust, I don't think I talked much about rust, and I have to tell you, I have a bit of a cavalier attitude. I know I should, over the years, have done more, but I just did not suffer any bad consequences. I used desiccants, but primarily I used heavy oils. You've heard me talk about Rangoon oil, and some of you have tried to buy Rangoon oil from Wesley Richards. And I think Rigby was offering some similar oil, but nobody seems to be making it. I could probably put something together myself, but no time. I haven't been particularly well lately, so there's a big gap in the videos, but somehow I'm still here. So anyway, what can I tell you about rust? Well, a heavy layer of oil, I learned. Actually, I can tell you a little story. I was working in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and it gets hot there. 100 degrees, 100% like humidity, really hot. As usual, there's still gun people there, and the collector used one of the heavy oils. I think it was Rangoon oil by the smell of it, and he didn't have a desiccant. So what's a desiccant? You probably already know. That's just a material that attracts moisture. And this will probably turn into two videos, but I took an interest in this. Why? Because a nice fellow by the name of Aaron sent me a unit to put in my vaults to test. So I really don't know that much about desiccants. I didn't really understand why do they attract water. And I had always been told that hot air can hold more moisture, which my scientific friend tells me is not true at all, but it's kind of roundabout true. It has to do with how agitated the water molecules are. Anyway, it's not worth getting into, but you can read about it. It's quite interesting. So I got this unit, and it's very similar. Like I said, I tend to be a very practical person, so I would just buy silicon dioxide beads, sometimes, not as often as I should, and they attract water. And why do they attract water? Well, the explanation I was given was that the surface area of a desiccant is so vast. So this drum, it has the equivalent of, I don't know, some kind of unbelievable surface area. And actually, I went on Google and I took a look, and if you look at silicon dioxide images under a scanning electron microscope, you'll see it looks like a coral reef. So through an interesting combination of surface area and a capillary action, desiccants do attract water. We all know this. We've seen the packages many times. Anyway, this company sent me this, and so I took too long to look at it, but it's what I like about it is it's kind of a drum that I don't need to think about. It's not a cookie tray full of silicon dioxide beads. There are other materials that are desiccants, not just silicon dioxide. Anyway, this little unit sits somewhere, and when these beads go black, they're orange right now, that means they're not carrying much water. And when they go black, that means they're full of water, and you stick it on this essentially heater, and that drives the moisture out of the beads, and your vault is dry. But you know me, I thought I sort of understand this, but I don't quite understand this, so I actually made a primitive test, which I thought I'll share with you before we get into these 35 caliber rifles. So I haven't shown you this before because it's too humiliating, but it's my homemade action vise. Sometimes I have to remove barrels. And sometimes these rifles I'm working with, the barrel hasn't come off since 18 or 17 something. Why I would do this is another story. But anyhow, this is low carbon steel, so I put it in the vault with a glass of water. And just to see what happens in there. Because there's really no movement of air. But there is movement of water and air at all times, which I now know. Anyhow, so this has a patina of rust on it. You may or may not be able to see. This only took a day to form. So a little water in the bottom of one of those green vaults, or any vault, a wet sock or a wet gun sock or a gun case, and you will have that result. Like that, I was actually surprised. Now this is low carbon steel, so it's going to rust more quickly. And this is, it really doesn't matter whether this action vise rusts or not. And why is it so long? Because I needed the leverage to get the, of course you're always clamping the barrel, not the action, so I have to custom make forms to hold the actions because they don't exist. And this gives me the leverage, and so far nothing has defeated me. This, even though it's not that thick, you can see it's not a very beefy piece of steel, but over that length I have enough leverage and it comes undone eventually. Sometimes it takes some horsepower. It's that Atlas thing, you know, give me a place to stand. Anyway, that's the story there. So then I did the same thing with the desiccant in there, and the water, and the same vise. And magically, no surface rust forms on the steel. If the water goes in here, so I don't know. These things are available. I'm sure you can find them, but it works very well, and I like that it dries out. And one can buy silicon dioxide beads as well, but what's nice is that it's all integrated. So Aaron, thanks very much for sending the unit. It definitely works, and in this, like I said, rudimentary experiment, it definitely prevented rust from forming. And it's easy. It doesn't take long for those beads to go black. You just have to make sure you don't put this in your vault. I think somebody told me they were doing that anyway. So that's how I deal with rust sometimes, like when I'm being a good boy. And then the rest of the time, I just smother the barrels and actions with Rangoon oil because it creates such a thick layer. And there's actually interesting science. Why does oil prevent rust? But that's, I'm going to bore you too much. So we'll leave that aside, and I'll stick this Afloya device over there. I wanted to show you my vault, but I think we're more interested in guns, and this is directly related to guns. You got to prevent them from rusting, especially you folks that write me from Florida or Africa or South Carolina, you know, where you have that kind of humidity like I described in Kuala Lumpur. And it's called Rangoon oil for a reason. That was the capital of Burma. I think it's now Myanmar, but I could be wrong. Anyhow, we'll set that all aside and get to the 35 calibers. So my goodness, I've heard from people virtually like around the world since I talked about the 35 Whelen. People wrote me immediately that the 9.3 by 62 is superior, which it is, without a doubt. It has more horsepower. But I think the 9.3 by 62 sort of, for lack of a better expression, it crosses a line into a higher level of power. This cartridge here is actually 30-06, but I put it out for you because I don't have any 35 Whelen right now. I sold my rifles, which was really stupid, but I did. And this is a 30 caliber bullet, so you'll have to imagine this with a 35 caliber bullet. We may as well walk through these just while the camera is focused on this primitive display. This is a 350 Remington Magnum. Not many people know about this round. I think came out in the 60s and 70s. One of the very first short magnums, there was a 6.5 Remington Magnum. The 350 got a reputation for tremendous power and blast and recoil. One of the most balanced cartridges of all time. This is a 358 Winchester. That's a necked up 308. Just a wonderful round. You could hunt with this and almost nothing else and never look back. 35 Remington, a classic cartridge. I'll show you the corresponding rifles that I have on the table. And here's a 350 Legend, which is a fairly recent cartridge. And on the table here is the 35 Winchester, which is my favorite cartridge in the 1895 Winchester. I do have one on the table to show you. This tower of power is the 358 Norma Magnum, which is in the range of the 375 Holland and Holland. Here's the 35 Winchester again. And I just put this brass here because that's 3040 Craig. Sometimes people ask me, well, I can't find 35 Winchester, and here's a little hint for you. If you check this 3040 Craig out, you'll be able to figure out what I'm up to with when it comes to getting ammunition that's not so easily available for the 35 Winchester. If you're wondering what this wicked looking tool is, it's actually a checkering tool, which I frequently use. I misplaced my pen. Like I said, it's been hard to even get to the filming table anyway. So let's start with the 350 Remington Magnum, just because it's such a striking cartridge. And believe it or not, this is a short barrel rifle. I bought this partly because I'd like to restore it. This is a Remington Model 600. It should have a ventilated rib, the appropriate sights. I have already a beautiful aluminum floor plate assembly. This is plastic. This one's actually in pretty good shape, but a lot of times the pressure of the magazine spring bellies out the polymer, which gets weak over time. It's a good aperture sight. This is a well-loved rifle. The sight is worn. The whole rig doesn't weigh hardly anything. They made, I think, one of the most, interesting, a lot of people think attractive laminate stocks. They came out with kind of another version of the rifle several years later, but I always thought the 600 and the later 660 were special rifles. So I'm going to get that rib, which is available. I forgot the name of the company, but I phoned them, and they make the rib in aluminum or steel. So I'll order a steel rib. Somebody, cut off, you can see these are the mounting screws, and they cut them off. I've been too sick to look into how to get those excavated, but there will be a way, and then get this back into some normal shape, and then we'll take it in the mountains. I've always liked the 350 Remington Magnum. The factory loads, it's true, it carries some recoil. You're pushing some size bullets, and you can look up all the ballistics and so on rather than me have boring you with them. But great round, 350 Remington Magnum, and for that matter, so is the 6.5. Again, these are unsung heroes that disappeared from the market for whatever reason. 35 Remington, this you may feel is familiar. It looks a lot like a Remington Model 81 or a Remington Model 8, doesn't it? It's fantastically engraved. We can go into this. Actually, we made a very good Patreon video where I review the 8, the 81, and this, which is a FN. I believe the model number from memory is 1900, and it's in 35 Remington. This must have been one of the most deluxe models. I mean, they engraved everything, including the barrel, and there are some very interesting coats of arms or what have you on them. I should research all this just to find the time. Beautiful rifle, and after all these years, functions wonderfully. I don't know how it shoots exactly. but it functions. And for a semi-automatic action, it doesn't have an automatic bolt hold open. There's a little button on the side that accomplishes that. A lot like the 8 or the 81, which you've seen me shoot before. 35 Remington. If you were buying a Remington Model 8 or an 81, you could find one in 30 Remington or 32 Remington, 25, and that whole family of cartridges. But I always thought that the 35 made the most sense. It's a powerful round, and like all of the 35 caliber cartridges, you've got a significant frontal area, reasonable velocity. Actually, I think everything you would be looking for in a hunting cartridge, and they're a lot of fun to shoot. And on that subject, this one they stopped making, I don't know why. This is a Ruger 77 357. I have the 7744 as well. Again, I didn't put a 357 cartridge on the table because you all know what that looks like. It also shoots 38 special, and this has to be one of the most shootable rifles. And in power, the 357 Magnum, this is no stellar 6.5 by 300 Weatherby, but that's not what it's meant to be. And like I've said many times, in my practical, simple world of hunting, most of the time, these vast distances, I leave to the better shots with better rifles and just wait for something closer, in which case I want momentum, mass, and good frontal area. Also, the barrels are lighter on 35 caliber rifles because the hole is bigger. It sounds funny. Here's one that I didn't know I would like so much. It's the 350 Legend Ruger American. Comes with these, are they AR mags? Something like that. And, a lot of people say a lot of things about, well, anything, but I can't say anything negative about the Ruger American. This easily a minute of angle rifle reminds me a lot of a kind of a modern rimless 357 Magnum. Very slick handling rifle. I think, Ruger went out of their way to put something on the market with a very good trigger, even though, as you know, I'm not fussy about triggers. Here's the 350 Legend, if you can focus on this cartridge. It in some ways it reminds me of the 30 carbine, but essentially it's that, it's got, I think the base is a 223 size case, and you'll know more about the details of the size of the brass, but what a practical round. And I've received letters. I remember one correspondence, I think the fellow was from Nova Scotia, really, really dedicated hunter, and his whole camp had all kinds of different rifles and calibers, and they've all switched to the Legend. They just feel that it punches through, it's got mass, it's got everything that they're looking for, and it's actually quite inexpensive to shoot. It's you can check that out. It's I'm surprised. So we looked at the Ruger American, 350 Legend, the Ruger 357 Magnum. These are all 35s, of course, and then here's one of my favorites. And then I guess I don't have a 358 Norma on the table. I have two bolt actions. There just isn't enough room. And anyway, they're not earth-shattering or anything. They're just Mauser rifles with 358 Norma Magnum barrels, which you can look up. The ballistics are actually on this box, but they're in metric, and I'm not smart enough to convert those measurements into understandable terms. So you could look up what they are. I always just look for feet per second and foot-pounds of energy, and obviously they wanted to make some high-end cartridges with these Swift bullets. Beautiful round. Here's the power to weight ratio of this little rifle, and you all know the BLR. I think we reviewed the takedown just because it's easily the simplest takedown system I've seen. This is not a takedown. This one's made in Japan. The collectors often look for this rifle What's slightly different, made in Belgium. I've never noticed a difference between the two. I think the quality is the same. I could be wrong. Removable box magazine, steel receiver, walnut stock. There's, it's nothing to write home about, but it's completely practical and functional. And this is in 358 Winchester. I had to have some rifle on the table in 358. I used to have a Remington custom shop 358 that was just supremely accurate. No explanation for how that rifle was that accurate. But again, generally speaking, I find the bigger bullets, and this is probably not scientific, they stay on course. This is, again, it's an easy minute of angle rifle. They're not even that expensive. Maybe not that easy to find in 358, probably because not that many people bought them in the first place. I think you can get all the new ones in 358. Again, power to weight ratio is almost unbeatable. These 35 caliber cartridges, when you're talking the 358, which is close to the 35 Whelen, is right up there. They are behind the 9.3 by 62 and so on, but not that much behind. It's surprising. Anyway, this is one of those rifles that's so easy to own. I've always liked the metallic sights. I had, so they sold it to me with the scope and it blocks the sight, so I'm gonna have to figure out how to do something better. And then if we haven't run out of time and our camera person is still alive, this is my favorite 1895 British proof marks rapid taper barrel. Again, we made a great video on Patreon where we went through my 1895 collection. You can see how the barrel tapers down, and it's got that, which is actually common on British guns. They use that rapid taper system. It lightens things up, and so you don't have that muzzle heaviness. This is a very old rifle. I think it's like, I don't know, turn of the century. Quite decent express sights. It's missing a spring. Very slick action, and I invite you to look up the 35 Winchester, because again the ballistics are quite impressive, and I like the 405, but again the trajectory limits it dramatically. Not that 35 Winchesters are shattering, but what a great round. Anyway, I'm gonna have to stop here because my voice is failing, but I hope you found that interesting. The part about the rust, there's all kinds of expressions, right? Rust never sleeps. And if you don't have Rangoon oil or something, some guys write me that they use motor oil and, whatever works for you. But definitely I learned a lot from this Floya device and from reading about Desiccants, which I really didn't know much about, but they absorb an awful lot of water for their size. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully we'll stay on track here and make some more videos, and take care until we see you again.